Billionaire love stories.
The highway into Ohio always stretches longer than it has any right to. Maybe it's the flat, endless fields pressing in from both sides of the road. Maybe it's the silence that settles in the cab of your truck when you've been driving for hours, and all you have is your own thoughts for company. Or maybe, just maybe, it's the knowing. Knowing what waits at the other end. My name is Jordan Cole. I had 10 days of leave. 10 whole days that most people would spend somewhere warm. Somewhere with a beach and a cold drink and absolutely nothing to prove. Instead, I pointed my truck north toward my parents' place outside Columbus, because my sister was having what my mom called, in that carefully sweet voice of hers, a small celebration. A small celebration. In our family, that phrase is a warning sign. It means someone is winning. And it means everyone else is expected to applaud. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. Because I think a lot of you out there know exactly what this kind of drive feels like. The drive back to a place that never quite felt like home. I pulled into the driveway just as the sun was dipping low, painting the sky that burnt orange that Ohio does so perfectly in the fall. 3 cars were already parked along the curb. My sister Vanessa's SUV sat front and center, freshly washed. Of course it was. The porch lights were blazing even though there was still light in the sky. Through the front window I could see shadows moving through the kitchen. Laughter floating out under the door frame. I sat in the truck a little longer than I needed to. Just breathing. I checked the time. I was still in civilian clothes. My dress uniform was hanging carefully in the back, bagged in plastic, just in case my mom insisted. She has always liked uniforms when they photograph well. Growing up, family gatherings in our house were never really about catching up. They were performance reviews. My sister Vanessa is 3 years older than me. She was the kid every teacher adored from the first week of school. Straight A's without breaking a sweat, student council treasurer. Then president, scholarships stacked up like trophies on a shelf. When she got into Ohio State, my parents threw a party big enough that they had to rent folding chairs and string lights across the backyard. I still remember the way my mom cried happy tears while my dad shook hands with every neighbor who came through the gate. When I enlisted at 19, my dad told people I was exploring options. Exploring options. That's how he described it. Like signing a 4-year contract with the United States Army was something I was doing to pass the time. Like it was a gap year. Like it was temporary. Like I hadn't walked into that recruiter's office with absolutely everything I had and laid it down on that desk. I stepped out of the truck and grabbed the small gift bag from the passenger seat. A bottle of good wine, a card I'd spent 20 minutes picking out at the gas station 2 exits back. Nothing dramatic. Vanessa had just been given expanded project responsibilities at her company. My mom had explained it over the phone, voice practically glowing. She couldn't quite describe what the promotion involved, not really, but she knew it was impressive. She's moving up fast, she said. Corporate loves her. Corporate. That word has always carried a kind of sacred weight in our house. Inside, the air smelled like baked pasta and those expensive vanilla candles my mom orders online. She hugged me quickly at the door, careful not to disturb her hair. My dad gave me a nod from across the living room. Remote in hand, the television muted behind him. Long drive? He asked. Not bad, I answered. He looked me over the way you'd look at a car you hadn't driven in a while, checking for signs of wear. Still down at Fort Liberty? Fort Liberty. Yeah. He nodded slowly. The kind of nod that means I hear you but I don't quite understand what that means and I'm not sure I need to. Then from the kitchen came Vanessa's voice. Loud and bright and easy, the way it always was in a room full of people she wanted to impress. She walked in holding her phone like it was part of her hand, dressed in a blazer and fitted trousers and heels she absolutely did not need for a house party. She was polished. She was always polished. Jordan. She said my name like an announcement. You made it. She pulled me into a hug with one arm. The other stayed curved around her phone. Wouldn't miss it, I said. That's sweet, she replied, already pulling back. You're not deployed or anything important right now, right? A little laugh chased the words. Not cruel. Not loud. Just enough to land. Stateside, I said. Good, she replied, already turning toward the group. At least someone can show up. That was the first nudge of the evening. Light and casual and dressed up like a joke. I'd learned a long time ago that not every comment deserves your energy. You save that for when it actually matters. One of her coworkers, a man I'd never met, asked what I did for work. I'm an IT specialist in the Army, I said simply. He blinked at me. Like fixing computers? Among other things. Vanessa stepped in before the silence could stretch too thin. She basically keeps things running, she said with a warm smile aimed at her audience. Army tech support. More laughter. Not mean. Just enough. I chewed on that and let it go. Have you ever felt like your family saw a version of you that just wasn't real? Drop a red heart if you felt that in your chest. Dinner was set up buffet style across the dining table, and my mom floated between guests refilling plates like extra food could smooth over whatever tension was quietly building in the corners of the room. My dad leaned toward Vanessa and asked about her project timelines, her deadlines, the size of her team. Big responsibility, he said, and he meant it the way he always meant it when he said it to her. Like he was proud before she even answered. It is, she replied. But I've always handled pressure well. She glanced at me when she said it. Quick and deliberate and then gone like she hadn't done it at all. I chewed slowly. I let it pass. Growing up, pressure in our house meant something very specific. It meant winning. It meant being first. It meant having proof that you were worth the investment. When I struggled in math my sophomore year, my dad hired a tutor within the week. When Vanessa struggled in chemistry, he told her the class just wasn't challenging enough for someone like her. When I brought home a B, I needed to push harder. When she brought home a B, the teacher must not have seen her potential clearly. By the time I left for basic training, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. In that house, success came with applause. Quiet competence didn't make the scoreboard. Basic training stripped a lot of that noise out of me. Nobody there cared what your GPA was. Nobody cared who your sister was. They cared whether you could carry your own weight. Whether you could finish what you started. I wasn't the fastest in my unit. I wasn't the loudest. But I showed up every single day. I did the work even when I was so tired I could barely stand straight. That kind of consistency doesn't photograph well at a family party. Back in the living room after dinner, Vanessa clinked her glass gently to gather the room's attention. Okay, before dessert, she said with that practiced ease she'd spent years perfecting, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Really means a lot to me. This promotion didn't just happen. I worked for it at my mom beamed from across the room. You could see it all over her face. That specific kind of pride that she seemed to save exclusively for Vanessa. I'm officially managing integration timelines for one of our federal contracts, Vanessa continued. It's a big deal. My dad nodded slowly, like she'd just been handed a cabinet position. That's impressive. One of her coworkers echoed it. Really is. Vanessa agreed with a smile. Not everyone is cut out for corporate pressure. Her eyes flicked toward me again. Just for a second. A couple of the guests glanced in my direction too, polite curiosity on their faces. I took a slow sip of water and held my expression completely still. My sister has always had a talent for making comparisons sound accidental. Like gravity just happened to pull them in her direction. She walked over and stood beside me. Voice just loud enough for the cluster of people nearby to catch it. You still in the same role? She asked. Different responsibilities now, I said. Oh, she replied, eyebrows lifting just slightly. Moving up? Something like that. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, I'm glad you're doing something. I set my glass down quietly on the end table. Across the room, my dad laughed at something one of Vanessa's coworkers said. My mom adjusted the flowers in the centerpiece like they needed straightening. The evening was still warming up. It hadn't peaked yet. Growing up, Vanessa didn't just win things. She performed winning. In middle school, she got Student of the Month 3 times in a single year. Every certificate went straight to the refrigerator, right at eye level. When I made honor roll my freshman year, I got a quick nod across the dinner table and a quiet good job that my dad had already moved past before I could even finish smiling. It wasn't that my parents ignored me. It's that standing next to Vanessa I always felt like the rough draft. The backup plan. The version that didn't quite make it to final print. I remember a dinner when we were teenagers. My dad turned to Vanessa and asked what she wanted to study in college. Business, she said without hesitation. Corporate strategy. He leaned back in his chair like she just told him she was going to be the first woman president. That's smart, he said. That's where the real money is. Then he turned to me. What about you? I told him I liked computers, networking, hardware, figuring out how things worked and fixing them when they didn't. He frowned like I'd said I wanted to collect leaves for a living. That's fine as a hobby, Jordan. But you need something stable. Stable. I sat with that word for a long time. I wanted stability too. I just didn't want it behind a glass door in a corporate tower. And the irony of him calling what I wanted unstable would hit me differently years later, when I understood what I was actually doing. What I had always been doing. By senior year, Vanessa had acceptance letters lined up across her desk like a winning hand of cards. Scholarships. Plans. A path laid out with golden bricks. My guidance counselor asked if I'd considered ROTC. I hadn't, not seriously. The idea of serving had been living quietly in the back of my mind for years, but I'd never let it out into the open. When I finally did, the reaction at home wasn't explosive. It was worse. It was a quiet disappointment dressed up in gentle concern. You're enlisting? My mom asked, the way someone might ask you if you were sure you wanted to jump off a perfectly good bridge. It's a good path, I said. Training. Benefits. Structure. My dad rubbed his forehead slowly. You sure this isn't just because college feels hard right now? That assumption, that if you chose something different, it had to be because you couldn't handle the standard route. I felt it like a punch I wasn't allowed to react to. I signed my contract anyway. Has someone ever questioned your choice like it was a mistake before you even started? Type yes in the comments if this hit close to home. Basic training was the first place in my entire life where nobody knew my sister's name. Nobody compared our GPAs. Nobody asked which one of us was the successful one. They cared about whether I could run, whether I could follow orders under pressure, whether I could stay focused when someone was screaming in my face and my whole body wanted to quit. I wasn't the recruit who got singled out for awards. I wasn't the one falling behind either. I found my rhythm. Do the work. Keep your head down. Get better every single week. One night, after lights out, a drill sergeant stopped at my bunk and looked at me for a long quiet moment. You're quiet, he said. Yes, drill sergeant. That's fine. Just don't confuse quiet with invisible. I've thought about those words more times than I can count. Back at the party, Vanessa was talking to her boss, a man named Daniel Mercer, mid-40s, easy in a suit, the kind of person who listens more than he talks and makes you feel the weight of that listening. That integration timeline was a mess before I took over, she was saying. Now it's finally organized. Good, he replied calmly. His eyes were steady. He wasn't impressed the way my dad was impressed. He was assessing. And I watched that from across the room. The first time I came home on leave after my technical training, I was proud. I'd been assigned as a 25 Bravo information technology specialist. The training was real. It required certifications, real exams, actual competence in systems that didn't forgive mistakes. At dinner that first night back, my mom asked what I did now in the Army. I manage and troubleshoot network systems, I said. Vanessa cut in immediately. So you fix computers. It's more than that. Sure, she replied with that smile. But basically, that word shrinks things. It takes something real and makes it smaller so it fits into a box someone else was already comfortable with. I heard that word from my family for years. Basically. Just. Kind of. She's just doing IT stuff. She kind of helps with computers overseas. My mom once told the neighbors I was helping with computers overseas when I was deployed to Kuwait on a logistics support rotation. She said it like I was babysitting laptops. And here's the thing that nobody in that living room understood. Around year 3, I hit a wall. I received a counseling statement for a sloppy briefing. I rushed through in front of my platoon. I stumbled. I doubted myself. I lay awake in my bunk wondering if maybe my dad had been right all along. If maybe I really had enlisted because I couldn't handle anything harder. Instead of walking away, I fixed it. I practiced presentations in empty rooms until midnight. I asked senior NCOs how they structured their briefings and I listened to every word. I stayed late reviewing procedures until I knew they were cold. The next time I stood in front of leadership, I didn't rush. I didn't shrink. Afterward, my platoon sergeant gave me a single nod. Better, he said. Not perfect. Better. That meant more to me than any certificate in any frame on any wall has ever meant. When I made sergeant, I called home. Nice, my dad said. Does that come with a raise? A little. Well, that's something. When Vanessa got her first bonus, they took her to dinner downtown. In January of that year, I'd been pulled into a briefing at Fort Liberty about an upcoming federal integration review. A mid-sized defense contractor was entering a new phase of a federal support contract, and my role was quiet, necessary work. I was assigned to assist with technical compliance assessment, which in plain English means you make sure what a contractor claims they built actually matches what the contract requires. You verify. You document. You flag inconsistencies before they become problems that nobody wants to inherit. The Army doesn't use dramatic language for this kind of work. There are no spotlights, no press releases. It's routine and necessary and completely invisible to most of the world. In March, when the contractor formally onboarded on our review cycle, I saw the company name at the top of the documentation for the first time. Took me half a second. That's Vanessa's company. I didn't react. I didn't say anything. I didn't call home. Big companies have hundreds of divisions, thousands of employees. The odds that she was tied directly to anything I'd be reviewing were low. I filed it away and kept working. The first few weeks were procedural. Access reviews, documentation cross-checks, policy alignment. Most of what I found was minor. Formatting inconsistencies, outdated references, normal growing pains during an integration phase. Nothing that raised a flag you couldn't lower with a correction. Then in early May, while reviewing workflow documentation, I found something that didn't line up. The internal documentation approval path described in their submission didn't match the configuration logs I was seeing in the actual system. It wasn't catastrophic. It wasn't a breach. But it was a compliance gap. And if it went uncorrected and reached formal audit escalation, it would trigger the kind of deeper review that slows everything down. That creates questions. That puts names on reports. I went back through the logs twice to make sure I wasn't misreading it. I wasn't. There was a real disconnect between written policy and actual implementation. I drafted an internal assessment. Clear. Direct. No exaggeration, no speculation, no drama. Just the gap and the recommended corrective action. And then I made a decision that some people might consider unusual. Instead of escalating immediately, I recommended that the contractor be notified through standard remediation channels first. Give them the chance to align documentation with the actual process. Fix it cleanly. Resolve it at the working level before anyone has to involve senior oversight. Escalation is always the easier path for the person doing the review. You pass it up the chain, leadership handles the consequences, and you walk away clean. But escalation also means delays. It means scrutiny for everyone involved downstream. It means consequences that ripple outward. My decision wasn't personal. I didn't even know which division had produced the gap. I made the call I would have made for any contractor, because it was the right call professionally, and because I believed the issue could be corrected without burning the house down. Back at the party, Vanessa's voice cut through the room again. Some people just aren't built for corporate pressure, she said, light and easy, letting her eyes drift toward me just long enough to land. It's a different world. A couple of her coworkers shifted with small polite smiles. Corporate pressure. I thought about briefing a room of senior NCOs after a 14-hour field shift. I thought about troubleshooting a network outage during a training exercise, while an entire operation waited on communication lines to come back up. I thought about the night in Kuwait when we worked straight through to sunrise because a system glitch was holding up logistics tracking and people needed those systems to function. Pressure looks different depending on your zip code. Daniel's gaze shifted toward me then, briefly, but with a kind of quiet attention that didn't feel casual. Where are you stationed? He asked. Fort Liberty, I answered. He nodded slowly like he was filing something away. Vanessa jumped in. She's been there forever. Almost 10 years. I corrected her gently. Almost 10 years. My mom looked up from across the room. That long? She seemed genuinely surprised. Like she hadn't realized that much time had passed. Time moves differently when no one's paying attention. Daniel's eyes moved to my shoulders for a second, probably seeing the faint tan line from where rank usually sits when you're in uniform. Staff sergeant? He asked. Yeah. He gave one small nod. Nothing dramatic. Just acknowledgement. He was cataloging things. I could feel it. Vanessa tried to redirect the room. clapping her hands lightly. Anyway, she said with a bright laugh, let's not turn this into a military appreciation night. A few people chuckled along with her. She was good at that. She always had been. The pivot. The redirect. The way she could pull a room back like it was on a string. I let it go. I moved toward the hallway to get some air. And I stood for a moment in front of the wall of framed family photos that my mom had spent years arranging just so. Graduations. Vacations. Christmas cards. Vanessa front and center in most of them. And me in a couple of them in uniform cropped slightly tighter than the others. Like the frame wasn't quite sure what to do with me. Vanessa appeared in the hallway behind me. Are you doing okay? She asked. Yeah. She crossed her arms and leaned against the wall. You've always been hard to read. She studied me for a moment. You know, Jordan, I push you because I don't want you to settle. I'm not settling, I said. She gave a small laugh. That's what you call it. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her whole face shifted into performance mode before she'd even finished reading the screen. That's Daniel. He wants to go over some numbers before he leaves. Of course he did. She straightened her blazer and headed back toward the living room. I followed a few steps behind her, and the hum of conversation rose as we re-entered. And this time when I took a spot near the edge of the room, more people were watching. Vanessa was showing Daniel something on her phone screen. A dashboard probably. Color-coded timelines and integration metrics. And all the language of corporate competence displayed in clean, satisfying graphs. That's the thing about corporate culture. It looks impressive from 6 feet away. Daniel was listening. But he kept glancing at me. A coworker turned toward me. So what's a normal day like for you? There isn't really a normal, I said. Systems maintenance. Security assessments. Troubleshooting. That sounds technical. It is. Vanessa chimed in warmly. She likes that stuff. Always has. Taking things apart. She meant it as softening. But it landed like a small shovel into the ground. Daniel's gaze moved between us. You've done integration assessments? He asked me. His voice had changed slightly. More direct now. Less casual. Yes. For federal contracts? Yes. The room went just a fraction quieter. Not obviously. Not dramatically. But something shifted in the air. The way a room shifts when a sentence arrives that has more weight than anyone expected. Vanessa jumped in quickly. Oh, that's cool. Small world. Small world, I agreed. Maybe. Or maybe systems are smaller than people think. Daniel glanced toward the dining table where his phone rested. Documentation alignment can make or break a review, he said evenly. I agreed. There was nothing in my voice. No challenge. No performance. Just agreement. Vanessa looked between us. The smile was still in place but pulled a fraction tighter than before. Vanessa clinked her glass one more time and the room gathered around her again. Because rooms always gather around Vanessa. That's just physics in our family. My dad raised his glass to her, the one who made it. He said with that easy, proud smile. And everyone clinked along and there was laughter and warmth and all the beautiful noise of a family giving its standing ovation to the person who earned it. I lifted my glass too. Calm. Steady. Exactly where I needed to be. I set it down before anyone noticed I hadn't actually taken a sip. The conversation drifted toward deadlines and contract milestones, and I listened the way I always do, without looking like I was tracking every word. Because in the Army you learn to process information without broadcasting that you're doing it. Daniel was still in the room. He hadn't left. And every so often, his gaze came back to me like he was doing arithmetic he hadn't finished yet. Vanessa was mid-sentence. And once I stepped in, things got organized, she was saying. Before that, there were gaps. Gaps? Daniel tilted his head slightly. What kind of gaps? Just process inconsistencies, she replied smoothly. Nothing major. I stayed perfectly still. One of her coworkers added quickly, we're tightening compliance now. Everything's aligned. Daniel didn't look impressed. He looked thoughtful. There was a long pause. In May, he said finally, after my assessment went through internal channels, a remediation notice had been sent to the contractor's designated liaison team. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't accusatory. It was procedural. Within 2 weeks, updated documentation was submitted. Aligned. Clean. Issue resolved without escalation. I never knew which division handled the response. I didn't ask. It wasn't my place to dig through org charts. And now here I was, standing in my parents' living room, and Daniel Mercer was looking at me with that quiet recognition in his eyes. How long have you been in it? He asked me. Almost 10 years, I said. Same specialty the whole time. Started technical, moved into more assessment work recently. He nodded slowly, like he was connecting dots internally. Vanessa waved a hand lightly. She's always been good with systems. Just a different track. Different track. That was accurate technically. Corporate track gets applause and performance bonuses and dinner downtown when the numbers are good. Military track gets responsibility and quiet accountability, and a nod from your platoon sergeant that means more than any framed certificate. Daniel's expression didn't change. But there was something there. Recognition. Not admiration. Not surprising. Just the quiet click of things falling into place. You've done federal integration assessments, he said. For contractors. Yes. The room went a little quieter. Not everyone noticed. But some of them did. Vanessa jumped in. Small world. But this time it didn't sound light. It sounded careful. Daniel didn't respond to her. He looked at me. What unit are you assigned to at Liberty? I answered. He nodded once slowly, almost to himself. I thought so, he said quietly. Vanessa looked between us. Thought what? Daniel gave a faint smile. Not amused. Not sarcastic. Just certain. I believe we've worked together, he said to me. My dad sat forward. You two know each other? Daniel glanced at me first silently like he was checking. I didn't move. Vanessa's voice sharpened just slightly. That's not possible. Federal compliance review, Daniel said, calm and measured. Earlier this year. The room felt smaller. Vanessa shook her head lightly. That was our systems audit. Internal. Not entirely, he replied. Silence settled in a way that wasn't polite anymore. No one reached for their glasses. No one laughed. My mom stepped out of the kitchen doorway fully, hands clasped together, eyes moving from face to face. She identified a compliance vulnerability, Daniel said. And this time nobody laughed. Can you imagine what that felt like? In your parents' living room? Let me know in the comments. Are you Team Jordan or did you feel something for Vanessa too? A compliance what? Vanessa asked. Daniel kept his attention on me. Vulnerability, he repeated. Early in the integration phase. My dad cleared his throat. Is that serious? Can be, Daniel said. If not addressed properly. Vanessa stepped forward, voice tight but controlled. Our team handled that internally. Yes, Daniel said. After it was identified. He finally turned toward her. Staff Sergeant Cole flagged the discrepancy. The use of my rank in my parents' living room felt like something shifting on its axis. Not inflating. Not dramatic. Just clarifying. Like a lens suddenly coming into focus. My mom looked at me like she was trying to recalculate 10 years of assumptions. Madison, she said softly. My old nickname. She only used it when she didn't know what else to reach for. It was a routine review, I said evenly. Vanessa laughed once, sharp. Okay, wait. You're saying she audited us? Part of the integration assessment team, Daniel said. That's not how you described it at work, Vanessa replied quickly. Daniel's expression didn't shift. Internal details aren't discussed casually. The temperature in the room changed. Not dramatically. Just noticeably. Like when a window opens and you feel the outside air even before you see it. My dad leaned forward. So what exactly did she do? Daniel answered in the same steady tone. She identified a documentation misalignment between stated policy and system implementation. My mom blinked. In English. He translated calmly. She caught something before it became a bigger problem. Vanessa crossed her arms. That was a minor formatting issue. Daniel looked at her. Then back at me. It wasn't formatting. Silence again. He continued, still factual, still even. If the documentation had gone to escalation in that state, it would have triggered a formal review cycle. My dad frowned. Which means what? Which means delays, Daniel said. Increased oversight. Questions about internal controls. Possibly reputational concerns at the contract level. Nobody reached for their drinks. Vanessa's voice lost some of its shine. But we fixed it. Yes, Daniel said. After remediation guidance. My mom looked at me slowly. You wrote that. I submitted the assessment, I said. Why didn't you say anything? She asked. Her voice was soft in a way I hadn't heard from her in a very long time. I shrugged lightly. It was work. That answer hung in the air longer than it should have. Because it was true. And because the truth of it said something about 10 years of conversations where nobody had thought to ask differently. For a decade, I had come home and answered in simplified versions. I fix networks. I manage systems. I do IT stuff. I had never said, I evaluate compliance on federal contracts. I had never said, my assessments carry weight that extends well beyond a help desk ticket. Not because it was classified. Not entirely. But because the room never seemed interested in that version of the answer. And after a while you stop offering it. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly. You're making this sound dramatic. Daniel shook his head once. It wasn't dramatic. It was thorough. My dad leaned back slowly. So she helped your company. Daniel answered without any hesitation at all. She protected the integrity of the integration phase. That sentence landed differently than anything else he'd said. Protected. Not assisted. Not observed. Protected. And this time nobody in the room said anything at all. The laughter that had been filling that living room all evening was completely, utterly gone. The room didn't move for a long time after Daniel said that. Protected. Like the word needed a moment to settle into the walls before anyone could breathe properly again. Vanessa blinked. A compliance what? She asked again, quieter this time. Daniel kept his eyes on mine. Vulnerability, he repeated. Early in the integration phase. He turned toward my dad, who had leaned forward so far in his chair he was practically standing. If the documentation had reached formal escalation in that condition, the review cycle would have extended significantly. He paused. It would have drawn external oversight. Questions about internal controls. Possibly reputational concerns attached to the division. My mom's hand went to her mouth. Oh. Vanessa's coworker spoke up from the corner of the room, quietly, like he was confessing something. If it had escalated, we would have been stuck in review for weeks. Maybe longer. Vanessa shot him a look that could have stopped a clock. But he didn't take it back. Daniel continued. The remediation memo recommended resolving internally before escalation. He turned toward me. That recommendation came from her. My dad stared. She could have escalated? Yes, Daniel said. That would have been standard procedure. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides. Escalation protects the reviewer, I said. It creates a paper trail. It distances you from whatever fallout comes. But it also creates consequences for everyone downstream. That's not always the right answer when the issue can be corrected at the working level. Vanessa's voice came out sharp. So you did us a favor. No, Daniel said. She did her job. There's a difference. The silence after that was different from all the other silences. This one had weight. Pressed against the walls. My mom stepped closer to me. She didn't reach out. She just stood closer like proximity could make up for something. We didn't know, she said softly. We didn't realize you were doing that level of work. I don't usually discuss projects. Because of clearance? Daniel asked. Yes. My dad rubbed his face slowly. All this time, he muttered. All this time. And then Vanessa said something I hadn't expected. She looked straight at me and her voice had lost its polish entirely. You could have told me, she said. I held her gaze. You never asked in a way that wanted the answer. The honesty in that wasn't sharp. It was just steady. And I could see it land. Daniel looked around the room one more time. When we evaluate integration partners, he said, we look at more than output. We look at understanding. He glanced at Vanessa briefly, then back toward the group. Understanding systems matters. Real understanding. Not surface fluency. Vanessa's shoulders were no longer squared. They were stiff. And which division handled that documentation response? He asked casually. She hesitated for just a second too long. Systems integration, she answered. He nodded once. Right. Nobody needed him to say more. The room understood. He slipped his phone into his pocket. Good work doesn't need applause, he said evenly. He wasn't looking at me when he said it. He didn't need to. But it wasn't addressed to Vanessa either. It was addressed to everyone in that living room who had spent years measuring success by volume. Vanessa adjusted her blazer. This is being overanalyzed. She forced a laugh, thinner than the ones that had come before it. We handled the issue. That's what matters. Daniel didn't disagree. You did, he said. After it was identified. The distinction lingered. After it was identified. My dad looked at Vanessa. So your team missed something? Every project has minor misalignments, she said quickly. Correct, Daniel replied. The question is how they're addressed. He turned toward me. In this case, the assessment recommended collaborative correction rather than formal escalation. Vanessa's coworker shifted his weight again, and when he spoke his voice was barely above a quiet confession. We adjusted our compliance sign-off chain after that cycle, he said. It made a real difference. Vanessa stared at him like she couldn't believe he was still talking. But she didn't correct him. Because she couldn't. Daniel's tone never changed. That adjustment improved documentation discipline, he said. He looked at my parents. The assessment wasn't dramatic. It was necessary. My dad stared at me like he was looking at someone he hadn't been properly introduced to. All this time he'd thought he understood what I did. All this time I'd let him. And suddenly I felt something loosen in my chest that had been pulled tight for so long I'd stopped noticing it. Vanessa opened her mouth and then closed it. Then she tried again. So what, she said. She catches something. That doesn't mean she's running operations. Daniel met her eyes. Operations fail without accurate assessment. The room went completely still. My dad let out a slow breath through his nose. My mom clasped her hands in front of her and looked at me like she was seeing something she should have seen a long time ago, and was only just now allowing herself to feel the weight of that. Vanessa's jaw tightened. Are you implying my team was careless? I'm implying improvement is ongoing, Daniel said. Professional. Controlled. Then he looked at her directly. There were response delays in your division's documentation chain. The spotlight moved cleanly. For the first time all evening. That was a team issue, Vanessa said quickly. It was a leadership issue, Daniel replied. Calm. Final. My mom took a small step backward. You didn't mention that, she said to Vanessa, almost gently. It was internal, Vanessa replied. Every team has growing pains. Daniel nodded slightly. Correct. Which is why we review. He glanced at me once more. External assessments help identify blind spots. Vanessa's composure cracked for just a moment. Not dramatically. Not loudly. You're making it sound like we were incompetent. I'm saying the review highlighted areas to strengthen. He paused. Staff Sergeant Cole's assessment was precise. That level of discipline isn't common. I shrugged lightly. It's standard where I work. And something about that sentence, the simplicity of it, seemed to land harder than anything else. Because it wasn't a defense. It wasn't a performance. It was just the truth. When I heard someone described as the family failure tonight, Daniel said, and I recognized their work firsthand, it stands out. Nobody moved. Vanessa uncrossed her arms. You're acting like she saved the contract. I'm saying she protected its integrity during a sensitive phase. Protected. The word filled the room again. And my mom said it back quietly like she was testing it. Integrity. For years, every conversation about me had centered on ambition and visibility and trajectory. Words that look good on a resume. Integrity doesn't show up on a LinkedIn summary. Quiet competence doesn't photograph well at family parties. But it was real. It had always been real. Vanessa shook her head slightly. This is getting blown out of proportion. No, Daniel said quietly. It's being clarified. He checked his watch briefly. Then he walked to the door. Before leaving, he turned toward me. Good work, he said simply. Thank you, I replied. No ceremony. No handshake. Just acknowledgement. And that was everything. After he left, the room sat in a quiet that felt different from all the ones that had come before it. My dad leaned forward in his chair with his elbows on his knees and looked at me for a long time without saying anything. I was proud of you tonight, he said finally. I don't need you to be proud, I replied. I just need you not to assume. He nodded once. Fair. My mom stepped forward and hugged me the way she had at the airport the morning I shipped out. Except this time there was no grief in it. This time it felt like she was trying to close a distance she hadn't realized she'd let grow. I should have asked better questions, she whispered. Maybe I said. But some answers don't fit into casual dinner conversations. Vanessa stood quietly across the room. Not performing. Not redirecting. Just standing there holding her phone the way you hold something when you need to keep your hands busy, so they don't betray how you're feeling. I didn't mean it the way it sounded, she said finally. About the failure thing. You meant it the way you've always meant it, I replied. You just didn't expect context. She let out a slow breath. I've worked hard too, she said. Softer now. I know that, I said. And I meant it. Her pressure was real. The loans, the corporate expectations, the constant performance cycle. Real and exhausting and not to be dismissed. But pressure doesn't justify the comparison. And working hard doesn't give you the right to tell someone else they've settled. She looked down at her phone. I guess we both handle systems, she said after a moment. Different kinds, I replied. That was enough. I grabbed my keys from the entry table. My mom asked if I was leaving. I said yes. My dad said I didn't have to go. I said I know. I stepped out onto the porch and the cool Ohio air hit my face and I stood there for a moment just breathing it in. Behind me, the house was quieter than it had ever been after a family gathering. No scoreboard running. No applause waiting to happen. Just reality recalibrated. I didn't win anything that night. No trophy. No dramatic apology that fixed a decade in one moment. No transformation scene with swelling music. What changed wasn't the house. What changed wasn't my family, not entirely, not overnight. What changed was the narrative. The story the room had been telling about me for 10 years. And all it took to shift it was context. Truth in a room that had never thought to ask for it. In the army, nobody cares who talks the loudest. They care who shows up. They care who does the work when it's unglamorous and invisible, and never going to be acknowledged at a dinner party. They care who protects the mission when it counts. That doesn't always translate at a family celebration. But it doesn't need to. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a calm correction. Sometimes it's watching the truth settle into a room that spent years not asking for it. And sometimes the real victory isn't proving someone wrong. It's realizing you were never what they called you in the first place. Speech balloon, I want to hear from you, speech balloon. Have you ever been the quiet one in your family? The one who did the real work while someone else got the applause? Have you ever sat at a table full of people who loved you but didn't actually see you? Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. Because strength doesn't have to be loud to be real. And you don't have to perform your value for the people who are supposed to already know it.